Okay, welcome to our section on the English colonies. The last chapter, we focused a little bit more on the Spanish colonies just to get us to the New World. And now we're going to be looking at the 13 colonies and how they were settled, why they were settled, and how they are different. And you can probably still see a lot of these differences today if you are familiar with any of the states that make up the original 13 colonies. Here's a map of the original 13 colonies. We know that around here, this is where Jamestown would have been first settled. And then the other big settlement that you'll be reading about is going to be up here in Massachusetts, which will be Plymouth, where the Pilgrims settled. They are both going to be established by the Virginia Company. These are just investors who decide to send different um, people who are willing to settle in this new world to find out if there's any gold or any resources worth having. Those are the ones who receive these charters. They come to this new world, find out if it's a place that they want to stay or a place that they can get rich from, and they either set up a living or many people will head back home. So Jamestown is where we're going to start. Well, actually, we're not going to start there because we actually briefly already talked about them. And John Smith and John Rolfe and Pocahontas are from there. And then would be the area that we consider the middle colonies today. A lot of Quakers and Dutch settled in this area. Up north, you're going to have more of Puritans. This is going to be where a lot of the witch trials will happen. If you've heard of the Salem witch trials, this is where you can find it. And then, of course, down south, we'll have the Carolinas and Georgia. And this will be, if you want to be a plantation owner, this is be where you would want to live. Georgia is actually set up, if you can look at this map right here, as a buffer, for one of the reasons, as a buffer between this territory, which is Spanish, and the rest of the English territory. So it's kind of just put there in order to keep things peaceful for the rest of the colonies. Of course, it is a lovely state today, known for its beaches. All right, moving on to the next. So we talked about mercantilism, just a brief definition. We know it's about gaining as much wealth as possible. One of the ways the English are going to do that is with this second point right here. This is the important point. You don't necessarily need to write down the mercantile system again. The Navigation Act of 1651 literally says that any English colonies that are established within this territory, going back here, any English colonies that are established here, they are only allowed to trade with England. That means if some French ships come into New York, they're not supposed to trade with the French, even though they might have some kind of goods that the English colonists living in the New World want. So it sets up a trade monopoly. And the colonists don't necessarily love this. So this is happening in 1651. Just keep that in mind, that this has been a bit of an issue. And this will be a cause of the Civil War, of the American Revolutionary War in the 1700s. One of the colonies that is going to be established, our nation's capital is located kind of within this right here, kind of surrounded by Maryland and Virginia. This is where Washington, D.C. is. This is where, of course, we're going in May. So Maryland is established specifically for Catholics. Catholics are not appreciated in England during the 1600s. So they are looking for a way to kind of get rid of the Catholics, get them out of the way. And so they give them a giant chunk of land and say, go settle it and enjoy it because nobody else wants to live there. And so they are actually, they do actually settle this territory. They call it Maryland in honor of Queen Mary, the Catholic Queen. And it's originally supposed to be settled by Sir George Calvert. He actually ends up dying. He gets the original land grant saying, King Charles says, sure, go set up this land. That's great. I don't care. Do what you want to do. He actually ends up dying before he can get settlers to go there or colonists to go to Maryland. And his younger son, Cecilius Calvert, is the one who takes over. He's the one who will move the settlers or the colonists from England to establish the colony for Maryland. And if you think about our religious tolerance today, please keep in mind that this is one of the only places that the Catholics can go without being persecuted. Here's a lovely little picture of Cecilius Calvert. I'm sure you enjoy his haircut. Much like the French, one of the things that they originally did was offer land to aristocrats. Well, aristocrats really don't want to go farm more land. So they decide, okay, well, if nobody's taking this land, let's give it to people who actually know how to work the land. And you have a lot more people who are then receiving land. And these might be middle class people, merchants, some farmers. They receive land and they go settle it in the New World, and they will establish farms and be thrilled to the fact that they actually own land that they can work. Because in England, most of the land is owned by the aristocrats, the nobility, and this is just a holdout from the Middle Ages. Um, Moving on. The Toleration of Act of 1649. You would think that since Maryland was established for Catholics that they would have nothing to worry about. You'd be wrong. Once again, sorry, I keep saying that. They actually have to write it down saying, hey, everybody, Catholics have rights. We are guaranteed this. And other religions can come in and be free as well, but you can't bother us here because we are allowed to worship freely. So they call that the Toleration of Act of 1649. They literally had to write it down to make sure that it was something that was followed. North and South Carolina, not going to focus a lot on here. If you can imagine, tobacco was found up here in Virginia. North Carolina, heavily known for tobacco growing. In South Carolina, you're going to have a little bit more. It's going to be a little wetter. A little bit more crops like indigo, rice, cotton definitely will be down here. Not saying they don't have cotton up here, because they do, but it's definitely going to be even more so down here. Those are some lovely colonial pictures of, up here. Ladies, this is what you could be wearing. Their little bonnet. That's great. If you were involved in the colonial militia, this is what your husband or sons or brothers or fathers would be wearing. And this is actually very typical of a house, what your house would have looked like if it looked like that. This would be very, very nice. North and South Carolina, originally they're just called, obviously, Carolina. They do split because there are a lot more cash crops being grown in the South. Like I said, indigo, rice, things like that. In the North, they focus a little bit more on tobacco, which is still considered a cash crop, but not anything as labor intensive as rice or cotton. Georgia, like I mentioned, is established as a buffer state. They're trying to protect the rest of the colonies from Spanish-owned Florida right here. Remember, St. Augustine, Florida is set up over here, and that was in the 1500s. So you can imagine the Spanish do have a presence. So Georgia, really all we want to do is protect the rest of this land. The other thing is, how do we protect it? How do we get people to live here on the border of Native American and Spanish land? Maybe being attacked by either group. We send over the debtors that are clogging up the prisons. And so one of the fun things about Georgia is it was established by people who didn't want to be in jail any longer. So they had an option, stay in an English jail, or B, move to Georgia and live on the frontier. You can imagine that many people actually picked the frontier. And some thought, heck no, I'm staying in England. This is just a picture of James Oglethorpe. He's responsible, or he's given credit for establishing Georgia as a colony. Another picture, just trading with Native Americans. This would have been pretty common. More than likely, that's a deer skin or some type of skin being traded. All right, and we will stop here and talk about New England later.